I will speak to you plainly, because at 96 years old, there is no reason left to decorate the truth. If you wish to grow old with strength in your bones, clarity in your mind, and steadiness in your heart, the work does not begin when you turn 70. It begins when you are young. Long before wrinkles appear, long before doctors begin talking about blood pressure and cholesterol, the future of your old age is quietly being written by the habits you practice every day. I know this because I have lived long enough to watch the story unfold across nearly a century. I have seen friends who were strong in their youth grow fragile before 60. I have also seen ordinary people, people who were never famous, never wealthy, walk confidently into their 90s with clear minds and steady steps. The difference was rarely luck. It was rarely genetics alone. Most often, it was the quiet power of daily habits repeated across decades. When you are young, your body forgives many mistakes. You can sleep too little, eat carelessly, and neglect movement, and still wake up feeling strong. Youth hides the consequences, but time does not erase those choices. It stores them. Every meal, every walk, every hour of sleep becomes a small investment in the future body you will inhabit. Think of the body as a long-term account that compounds slowly. Habits practiced in your 20s and 30s accumulate silently through the years. Strong muscles protect your bones. Balanced nutrition protects your heart. Good sleep protects your mind. Each choice becomes a quiet deposit into the health you will depend on decades later. By the time you reach old age, you are no longer living on today's choices. You are living on the accumulated results of thousands of decisions made long ago. And that is the secret many people discover too late. Healthy aging does not begin in old age, it begins in youth. If you had met me when I was 20 years old, you would not have predicted that I would one day be speaking to you at 96. I was not extraordinary. I was not born into a family of athletes or doctors. I was simply a young woman who noticed something very early in life. The body remembers everything. At that age, most young people believe the body resets every morning like a clock. If you eat poorly today, tomorrow will erase it. If you skip movement for a week, nothing truly changes. Youth gives that illusion because the body is resilient and forgiving. But beneath that resilience, the body is also quietly recording every pattern. In my early 20s, I began to notice a difference among the older adults in my town. Some women in their 70s walked through the streets with upright posture and bright eyes. Others moved slowly, leaning on railings, tired after only a few steps. At first, I assumed it was simply fate, but as the years passed, I began to see a pattern. The women who aged well had lived very ordinary lives, yet their daily routines shared certain habits. They walked almost every day. They cooked simple meals instead of relying on heavy processed foods. They slept regular hours. They carried themselves with calm rather than constant stress. None of them were following modern health trends. They were simply living in rhythm with their bodies. And what fascinated me most was this. Their strength in old age did not begin when they turned 70. It had begun 40 or 50 years earlier. This is the compounding effect of health, though most people never use that phrase. When a habit is repeated daily, its influence multiplies over time. One walk may seem insignificant. One healthy meal may feel trivial. One good night of sleep may appear ordinary. But repeat those choices thousands of times across decades, and they reshape the biology of your body. Your metabolism becomes more stable. Your heart becomes more efficient. Your muscles remain active. Your bones remain dense. Your brain remains alert. Think about muscle for a moment. When you are young, muscle builds easily. But muscle is not just about strength or appearance. It is one of the body's most powerful protective systems. Muscle helps regulate blood sugar. It supports the joints. It protects the skeleton. It stabilizes balance. Without it, the body ages much faster. I did not understand the full science when I was young, but I understood the result. People who kept moving stayed stronger for longer. So I walked, not as exercise for a competition, but simply as a daily habit. I walked to the market. I walked to visit friends. I walked through parks and streets. Some days it was 20 minutes. Other days it was an hour. But the habit remained constant. Over 70 years later, those simple walks have accumulated into thousands of miles of movement, and the body remembers every one of them. Food was another quiet teacher. When I was growing up, meals were simple. Fresh vegetables, grains, beans, fruits, modest portions of meat. Food was cooked at home, not manufactured in factories. We ate slowly, and we stopped when we were satisfied rather than full. At the time, it was simply the culture of our households. Today, scientists would call it a diet that protects metabolic health. But the label does not matter. What matters is the long-term pattern. When the body receives steady nourishment rather than constant excess, it maintains balance. Blood sugar remains stable. Inflammation remains low. Energy remains steady. Over decades, that balance becomes protection against many diseases that people now believe are inevitable parts of aging. I have also learned that sleep may be one of the most underestimated habits of youth. When you are young, you believe sleep is optional. Many people trade sleep for work, entertainment, or stress-filled thoughts that keep the mind racing into the night. But the brain repairs itself during sleep. Memories are organized. Hormones are balanced. Cells repair microscopic damage that accumulates throughout the day. When sleep becomes irregular for years, the body pays a price that may not appear until much later. I guarded my sleep the way a farmer guards water during a dry season. I went to bed at a consistent hour. I allowed the body to rest deeply. Over decades, that consistency protected my mind more than I realized at the time. But perhaps the most powerful habit was not physical at all. It was emotional. Stress, when it becomes constant, can age the body faster than almost anything else. I saw people who worked themselves into exhaustion with worry. They carried anger for years. They replayed every disappointment again and again in their thoughts. Their bodies tightened under the weight of it. I made a decision early in life that I would not allow every storm to live permanently inside my mind. Problems must be faced, of course. Life always contains difficulty. But carrying tension every hour of every day slowly poisons the body. Calmness, like any habit, can be practiced. When something troubled me, I walked. I breathed deeply. I spoke with friends. I wrote my thoughts down until the noise in my mind quieted. These small practices protected my nervous system in ways I could not fully understand when I was young. Years later, scientists began explaining that chronic stress raises inflammatory hormones that damage the heart, the immune system, and the brain. But even before the science, life itself was already teaching the lesson. Healthy aging is not built from one grand decision. It is built from thousands of ordinary ones. The walk you almost skipped, the meal you prepared instead of buying, the hour of sleep you protected, the anger you chose to release rather than carry. Each of those moments may seem insignificant when viewed alone, but together, they create the biological environment in which your body will age. By the time a person reaches 70 or 80, the body is revealing the accumulated results of decades of habits. The heart reflects years of nourishment or neglect. The bones reflect years of movement or inactivity. The brain reflects years of rest or exhaustion. Time is the multiplier. Habits are the input. Aging is the outcome. And when I look back across my 96 years, I can say with certainty that the small habits of youth quietly shape the strength of old age. When you live as long as I have, you begin to see aging not as a sudden event, but as a slow unveiling. The body reveals year by year what it has been building quietly beneath the surface. Some people are surprised by what they see in their 60s or 70s, as if old age appeared overnight. But to someone who has watched nearly a century pass, the truth is very clear. The seeds of old age are planted decades earlier. I began to notice this pattern most clearly when I reached my 50s. At that time, many of my friends were beginning to talk about health in ways we never had before. Some struggled with blood pressure. Others spoke about fatigue that seemed to follow them constantly. A few began experiencing early signs of diabetes. These problems appeared suddenly to them. But when I looked closer, I could see that the story had started much earlier. The body is not a machine that breaks without warning. It gives quiet signals for years, but those signals are often ignored because youth creates a sense of invincibility. Take the heart, for example. When we are young, the heart works tirelessly without complaint. It beats more than 100,000 times every day, moving blood through a vast network of vessels that nourish every cell in the body. But the heart is deeply influenced by how we live. If a person spends decades eating poorly, avoiding movement, and living under constant stress, the arteries slowly become stiff and inflamed. This does not happen in a single year. It happens gradually, layer by layer, until one day the consequences finally appear. The opposite is also true. When the body is supported through steady habits, balanced nutrition, regular movement, calm breathing, sufficient rest, the heart adapts in remarkable ways. The vessels remain flexible. Blood flows more easily. The entire cardiovascular system becomes more resilient. By the time a person reaches their 70s or 80s, the heart they carry is often the one they built slowly throughout their adult life. The same story can be told about bones. When I was young, people rarely talked about bone density. But I noticed that some older women remained upright and active well into their later years, while others developed fragile bones that bent under the weight of time. Many assumed this was simply a matter of aging. But the truth is that bones are living structures that respond to how we use them. Bones grow stronger when they are challenged through movement. Walking, lifting, climbing stairs. These activities send signals to the body that the skeleton must remain strong. Without that signal, bones gradually lose density. This process begins much earlier than most people realize. Bone strength is built most effectively during youth and early adulthood. The stronger your skeletal foundation becomes during those years, the more protection you carry into old age. That is why the habits of youth matter so deeply. They determine the reserve strength your body will rely on later in life. The brain follows a similar pattern. Many people fear cognitive decline as they grow older. They worry about memory loss or the fading sharpness of their thoughts. But the brain, like every other organ, responds to the environment we create for it. When the brain receives good blood flow, deep sleep, nourishing food, and regular mental engagement, it remains remarkably adaptable even into advanced age. Scientists today speak of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections. But the principle itself is simple. The brain strengthens when it is used and supported. Throughout my life, I remained curious. I read books. I learned new skills. I held conversations with people from different generations. Even now, at 96, I continue to challenge my mind with reading and reflection. These small acts keep the mind awake, like opening windows in a house so fresh air can circulate. But beyond muscles, bones, and brain, there is another system quietly influenced by the habits of youth, the immune system. When the body lives under constant pressure, poor nutrition, lack of sleep, chronic stress, the immune system becomes confused. It struggles to defend against real threats while also creating unnecessary inflammation. Over time, this imbalance contributes to many of the illnesses people associate with aging. But when the body is supported with consistent nourishment and rest, the immune system functions with greater clarity. It responds when needed and remains calm when not. This balance becomes incredibly valuable later in life. You see, aging does not only depend on how long we live, it depends on how well the body can repair itself along the way. Every day, tiny forms of damage occur inside the body. Cells wear out, proteins break down, DNA experiences small errors that must be corrected. The body contains extraordinary repair systems designed to manage this constant maintenance, but those systems work best when the body is supported. Healthy habits in youth strengthen these repair systems. They maintain metabolic balance. They reduce unnecessary inflammation. They allow the body to correct problems before they accumulate. Over decades, this maintenance makes an enormous difference. I often compare it to caring for a home. If you repair a small crack in the wall when it first appears, the house remains strong. But if the crack is ignored for years, it spreads, weakens the structure, and eventually becomes much harder to repair. The body works in the same way. Healthy habits are not dramatic actions. They are small acts of maintenance, repeated again and again across time. Drink water instead of sugary drinks. Walk instead of sitting for hours. Eat whole foods instead of heavily processed ones. Sleep deeply rather than living in constant exhaustion. Release stress instead of allowing it to accumulate. Each action seems small in the moment, but the body responds to consistency more than intensity. By the time you reach old age, the body you inhabit reflects the environment you created for it throughout your life. I do not say this to frighten young people. I say it because it is empowering. Many people believe aging is mostly determined by fate. They assume genetics decides everything. But after nearly a century of observation, I can tell you that lifestyle quietly shapes far more than most people realize. Of course, we cannot control everything. Life contains surprises, illnesses, and hardships that no habit can completely prevent. But the foundation we build through daily choices greatly influences how resilient we remain when those challenges arrive. Today, when people ask how I have remained active at 96, they often expect a secret remedy or a special diet discovered late in life. But the truth is much simpler. The strength of my old age did not begin when I became old. It began many decades earlier, in the quiet habits of youth that accumulated slowly across time. Now, at 96 years old, I can look back across nearly a century of living and see the pattern with remarkable clarity. Life moves faster than we expect. Youth feels endless when you are inside it, but the decades pass quietly, one year flowing into the next. And while time moves forward, the body is always keeping score. People often ask me when they should begin caring about their health. Some believe the moment arrives at 50, when the first warning signs appear. Others wait until retirement, when doctors begin prescribing medications and advising lifestyle changes. But by then, the body has already spent decades adapting to the habits it was given. The truth is much simpler and perhaps more hopeful. Healthy aging does not begin in old age. It begins the moment you start repeating a habit. Every walk strengthens the future you will live in. Every nourishing meal supports the body you will rely on decades later. Every night of deep sleep repairs the mind that must carry you through the years ahead. None of these actions feel dramatic when you are young. They are quiet, almost invisible choices. But time multiplies their influence in ways that few people fully appreciate. By the time old age arrives, the body is revealing the accumulated result of thousands of ordinary days. If those days were filled with movement, balance, nourishment, rest, and emotional calm, the body often continues serving you faithfully far longer than you might expect. And that is the message I wish every young person could understand. You are not only living for today, you are building the future body that will carry you through the later chapters of your life. Take care of it while it is strong. Respect it while it is resilient. Because the habits you practice in youth quietly become the health you experience in old age.